without further ado, I want to introduce our guest speaker today. She is the assistant professor of higher education at FIU. She's also currently co-authoring a book called Basic Counseling Skills for Higher Education Professionals. She is the owner of Pathway College Consulting. And most importantly, she is mom to Annie and Teddy in grades 8 and 6. So with her busy schedule, she is able to carve out time and join us this morning, and we appreciate her time. We know how busy she is. And if anyone has any questions throughout the presentation, please go down to the little chat bubble at the bottom of the screen, and questions will be sent to Wynn Avajanette, and we will share them with Rebekah throughout the presentation. So take it away, Rebekah.
Great, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see everybody. And I think the sun might be shining a little, so that's nice. I have one kid home and one kid off to school. So I don't think the 8th grader will show her face. So I think we're good for a little while. I'm assuming she's getting ready for her class, but it starts in 3 minutes. So there's a good chance she's still asleep. So I don't know if you're all having that same issue. Oh no, Miss Chancey, she's wide awake. I promise she's ready. I just saw Miss Chancey shaking her head at me. She's awake, ready to go. But that's part of what we're going to talk about today too, is some of the challenges I think that we're all facing. And it was really nice to be asked to speak again. Since I spoke last year too, I've had different parents chatting with me, and just in my casual conversations with my friends, we've all been talking about the challenges that we've faced together since March. And I think a lot of us were hoping we wouldn't still be in some of these situations that we're in today, but hopefully we will be on the upswing and heading out of some of the dark times that we've had. So with Corona and some of the other things, but I've been teaching on Zoom, so I'm pretty good at it, but technology never ceases to amaze me on what it can do when you don't want it to. So hopefully we'll be okay here. So I'm going to share my screen, and you should be able to see what I'm doing here. So you should be able to see all this, right? All right. Okay, everyone can see, yeah? We're good? You can see this, yes? Okay, great. So I think most people know well, I shouldn't say most people, because people don't, but I'm Rebekah Schulze, and I think Danielle already introduced me. And I'm a professor at FIU. I was just promoted to associate professor, so that was pretty exciting and a lot of work. And my area of research, as I think you know, is college student mental health, suicide prevention, that type of work. So that is always what I'm sort of looking at and thinking about. And that's why I'm here to talk today, is about sort of some of the issues that we're facing, how you can be helpful, how you can manage some of your own self-care, which is really difficult as a parent right now, I think. I know I have a lot of moments where I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm a professional at this. So I think a lot of what I want to say to a lot of you as parents, as best I can, is you are not alone in this, and that you may feel like you are, and you may feel like you're failing a lot, and you're not. So if I say nothing else to any of you, it's please don't feel that way. Well, I shouldn't say please don't feel that way, because your feelings are completely valid, but just know that you're not alone in this, and that sometimes I feel that we put out on Facebook and all these other places that everyone else knows what they're doing and everything's great, and wow, look at how great all these other kids are and all these other parents, and you sit there and you think to yourself, wow, there must be something wrong with me, and there must be something wrong with my kids and how I'm doing it. And I just want to kind of put that message out there that that's really not the case. And I think we have this sort of pressure on ourselves and on everyone and our kids that, there's this persona out there that we put out there, and that really behind the scenes, a lot of people are struggling. So I just want to kind of put that out there to everybody. When I teach my mental health course, that's the one thing we start with, is sort of this universality of struggle, but nobody sees that. So let's just sort of start from there. So I just want people to know that, because I think what happens is we struggle and we are sort of, we feel alone in that. And I know for me, my best moments are when a friend texts me, or I talk to a friend and they're like, oh, my kids are driving me crazy, or I'm failing today. And, I say, I am with you. I hear that, because then you realize you're not alone in the things that you're dealing with. So don't be afraid to share that with your friends, your closest people that you trust, because I think there's some comfort in that. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing today, what some of the climate is, some tips and suggestions for you, as well as just some open conversation, and try to see where you all are. So, all right, let's see. So I kind of want to start with this video, but it never works when you do it there. So I always pop it in and it never works, and I knew it wouldn't. So, oh wait, hold on. Here, might work this way. Nope. All right, hold on. Some of you probably have all seen this. I have it down here too. Hold on. I'm going to play this for you real quick.
Because of coronavirus, you are going to be quarantined, but you have a choice. Do you A, quarantine with your wife and child, or B?
That's like my favorite video, I think, of all the kind of memes that have been out there, because I think that's how a lot of us feel sometimes, that anywhere but here, right? Anywhere. I don't want to be home. I don't want to be with my kids. I don't want to be with my partner. I just want to be, anywhere but here. And I saw that meme. I think I sent it around to a bunch of my friends at the beginning, because it just made me laugh. And I watched it, I'm telling you, over and over and over. Anytime I was like, I can't deal with my life, I would just watch that guy and go, I'm with you, man. Like, I feel you. So I think just remember that if you're feeling that way, it's okay. And if you remember at the beginning of the virus, when we were all at home, I remember watching a lot of people, and again, there's no right or wrong in any of this, but people were exercising and walking and spending all this great time with their family, and they were doing crafty projects, and they were cooking, and they were taking on these hobbies. And I was like, I can't even get off the couch. I was like, I'm so impressed with all of you, but I'm just going to kind of binge watch TV here and eat a lot of food. So I'm super impressed with all of you, but that's not me. So, I mean, I walked, like I went on a few walks and I cooked a few things, but, it was sort of this pressure of, if you don't, master the game of chess during Corona, you're a failure. And I was like, I got through Schitt's Creek, and I'm pretty impressed with myself. So, I think that I loved this guy because he was like, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm out of here. So I think just that sort of, I wanted to kind of start there with sort of this laughing. And I always start my classes like that, with something kind of funny to get people in the mood for talking. But I think that that's an important place where we sort of think about where we are with it. And it's okay. It's okay to have those moments where you want to say anywhere. There was another meme I saw recently, which was like, I don't care if Trump wins. I don't care. Or if someone wins, I'm traveling. If someone else wins, I'm traveling. I don't really care who wins. I just want to travel, which is true. We just kind of want to get out of our current situation sometimes, and it's okay to feel that way. So I want to talk a little bit here about, what we're dealing with. I've never done this before, so this might be a colossal failure, but I also tell my students, if you don't try something new sometimes, you're never going to get anywhere. And that kind of ties into what I'm talking about today too, which is challenging yourself and challenging your kids to try something and to not be afraid. So like, even in this situation that you're in at home, or you're in with your children, or your families, if they are trying something and they're afraid to do it, you say, just try it. What's the worst that's going to happen? You might fail. And I talked about this in my presentation last year. Failure is really good for you. Failure is when you learn things. Failure is when you figure out who you are. There's a question on the Common App actually for essays, which says, tell us about a time you failed and what you learned from it. Because college is really, that's important. And learning how to fail is super important. So for me, I try to model that. So I've never used this before, but it's supposed to, so this might not work. So please just know if this doesn't work, I'm sorry, but let's try. We just did it in an open house for FIU, and it was really cool. So go to Menti, if you can, whoever can, try to go to menti.com and put this code in, and you should be able to see this question. Tell me what your kids are struggling with, and you can enter a bunch of words. I'm going to open it up here on my screen too, and then we should see a word. We should be able to see a word bubble, and it should start to pop up here. So let's see if that works. Let's try it. But I don't know if it'll work, but let's try. If not, we'll just try it. So I'm going to give it a minute and see if it actually works. Maybe Danielle, you can tell me if it's working on your end. Oh, it's working. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Yay. So the bigger word will start to, will pop up the more that people put that in. Y'all, I'm so excited. I've never done this before. So this gets me to kind of see where people are, the people that are watching today, like kind of what the sleep is a big one. Your kids' schoolwork, not traveling, loneliness, schoolwork is popping up quite a bit. I'm excited. I'm gonna start using this in my class. You all were my guinea pigs for this. I'm so excited. Trying to engage with my students virtually has been a bit of a challenge. So this was something we used just recently, and it was really interesting how we incorporated it. Okay, I'm gonna give it like another minute, and then I have no idea how to stop this. So that's my next challenge. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so lots of good stuff here. Friendships is starting to take a new place. So lots of good things in here. It looks like boredom, friendships, not traveling, engagement, missing time with friends. Okay, so this is a lot of what I want to talk about too. So thank you all for doing that. All right, so I'm gonna stop that. There's probably a way for me to stop it on there, but I don't know how. So we can come back to it, but I'm gonna go back to my presentation. Thank you all for doing that. So we're gonna talk about some of those things, but I think a lot of, actually, I'm gonna pull that up again real quick. So I think that, oops, nope, that's, sorry. Those are my clients. Hold on, let me stop that. Those are the college kids. So I think that those are a lot of good things that our students are struggling with, and our kids are struggling with, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that today as well. So, so I think that what you're seeing is accurate, and what you all just brought up is everything I would have expected. I think that our children are very stressed. This normal that they're dealing with is not normal. And everyone keeps saying, these times are unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. And that's true. So what happens is no one really knows how to deal with it. And we keep hearing that. But they continue to experience a lot of loss. And that's something I want to touch on a little bit here, is that that theme has come through quite a bit, is that our children are having a lot of loss. And I think, I don't want to forget here, but it doesn't really matter in some ways. We also have a lot of privilege. So I think I've heard that as well from a lot of people, and I want to just mention that, but I think it doesn't, for the purposes of our conversation, that doesn't really, to me, nothing doesn't matter, but this is who we are, right? So regardless, I think sometimes, we think, like, my husband will say sometimes, he hates when I talk about him, so shh. He'll say, I can't believe our kids are upset because look at everything they have. And I try to tell him it doesn't matter though, because that's their world and that's the world we've given them. So their reality is their reality, and you can't expect them to say, you can't expect an 11-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 17-year-old or a 5-year-old to say, my birthday just got completely ruined, but I go to a private school and my mom drives a good car and I have nice clothes. So I'm going to understand that what I have compared to what someone else has, I'm going to be totally okay with it. That's the way a 48-year-old thinks. That's not the way an 8-year-old thinks. So I think sometimes and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later too, we have to recognize that we can explain that to them and we can help instill these issues of privilege and where they're coming from and putting it in perspective and talking about it. But that's very deep, high level thinking for kids right now. So I think we can be frustrated and say, how can you be upset about this? Look at all these things you have. They're kids. We don't get that sometimes. So I think recognizing this loss for them, it's their loss and it's real to them. So I think that it's really important to sometimes think from their eyeballs. And I'm going to talk about that later too. So they're experiencing all this loss. And a lot of you talked about that in the Mentimeter that we just did. Friendships, social interactions, celebrations, routines, family. Someone said I was talking to, just so my friends who are out there know, I'm not going to call any of you out by name, I promise, but you might be like, oh, that was me. they're in our texts and in the things they're doing. They haven't hugged their grandparents. They haven't seen family members. They haven't, things that are normal to them are being lost to them. So they're really feeling unsettled. Everything is unpredictable. That's something I really want to point out to you all as parents too. And some of this we know in our heads, but it's good to remember and it's good to hear. And I forget it myself. Nothing's relied upon. Am I going to school tomorrow? I mean, that's literally a conversation in my house every day. Maybe you all as well. Mom, am I going to school tomorrow? Like, when have we ever had that conversation in the history of our lives, really? And other than, I don't feel well, or is tomorrow a holiday? But it's literally in my kid's head every night, every conversation before we go to bed. Mom, am I going to school tomorrow? Am I virtual tomorrow? Like, craziness, right? So whereas, I mean, for me and for most of us, all of us, school was your constant. It was like, it should have been, and it should be your safe place, your place where you're safe. It's a routine, it's constant, until the moment I came home from college and I sat in my driveway and I literally cried because I was lucky that I had such amazing experiences, and I sat in my driveway and I cried because I thought, what am I gonna do now? Like, I've gone to school every day for my life since I can remember, and now come August, whatever, what am I going to do? Like, I felt like my life had ended in some ways, because that routine, when I think about it now in that context, that routine was so set. I relied upon it. I knew. Our kids, that's been blown up. It's been blown up. They can't rely on it. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know what it feels like. And they don't know literally from night to night, what am I doing tomorrow, Mom? So I think for us, like, we're adults. I use that term, we're adults. But we're able to sort of roll with that. Kids, this is not normal for them. I'm sure many of you have heard this expression so many times. Kids thrive on routine. Kids thrive on that safety of that routine. That's gone for them. So I think when your children are, like I wrote in that bullet here, their sense of safety is in upheaval, because this sort of tried and true of school has been taken away from them. And I think the USchool has done a great job of trying to put that there for them. And I think schools have tried their best. So this is not a commentary on school. It's just on the society that we live in right now. So that's a big problem. And I think that's creating a lot of stress for our children. Social interactions are very limited. I want to talk about that really quickly. Although I think it's huge right now for them. And this came out big in the Mentimeter too. Normally you go to school and you're able to work out your issues, your problems. You see your friend and that issue you had last night. You see each other, you have lunch, you're chatting in the hall, you deal with it. They don't get to do that anymore. So I've had this happen quite a bit, more so with my 8th grader, who's a girl, and I don't want to get into the gender of it, but I think there's a difference there to some extent, although I think boys have the same issue, and some of my girl issues have been with boys. So I think it crosses genders, traditional gender in that way. So I think when I speak gender, I'm speaking traditional boy, girl. That's a whole different presentation, by the way. So about gender. So I think that now they're dealing with their issues and their friendship problems, as some of you I think were alluding to in your Mentimeter, via social media. They get into a fight, they're fighting over social media, and then friendships are gone. My daughter's lost some friendships over this time because they'll get into a fight and they don't have the opportunity to just see each other face to face and just work it out. So that's another issue. And right now I'm just talking about the climate, and then we'll talk about how to work with some of this. And then again, not getting into anything major, but politics, racial tension. We might think that these are things, and doesn't matter where you fall on these. So that's not important. But the bottom line is, our kids hear and see this stuff. And you might think that they don't, or they don't feel it, but they do. You can't live in this world and not. They have social media, most of them, your TV's on, you are talking about it. They're hearing it, they're feeling it. And some of them might be very active in it and some of them might not, but it's still impacting them. You can't be in this world right now and in this society without it impacting you one way or another. So all these things are kind of impacting them. So, this is what might happen. And I don't mean to be rushing, but we don't have tons of time. So I'm trying to kind of get through some of this so we can chat a little. So this is what you might see. because this is all the stuff going on in their heads. So what you might see is kids aren't expressing things the way that we do. You know, I'm able to sit there, I'm able to verbalize, I'm able to call one of my friends and say, here's what I'm feeling. Our kids don't do that. They're not going to sit around with their friends and say, hey, you know, I'm feeling really stressed about the racial injustice in our country right now, or I'm feeling really upset about, you know, what's happening with the coronavirus and what's going on with the vaccine and how do you feel about that? I mean, if you have a kid who does that, awesome. And, you know, Annie's pretty verbal. Thank goodness we're getting her on the debate team because she can get it out there. But, you know, but some kids can't. And even when they do, their behavior changes and comes out different ways. You might see them sad, angry, withdrawn, rude, all those things. And it might be something you don't understand. And I'm going to tell you, honestly, even I miss it sometimes. I was sitting with one of my friends the other day and I was saying to her, what's wrong with my kid? Like, she's so mad lately. She's so angry. She's been pretty rude. And I'm doing a presentation on this for all of you. And even she had to turn to me and say, look what she's dealing with. She just lost 2 grandfathers in 4 months, the coronavirus, politics, school. And I was like, duh. Like, even I had to have a friend kind of check me on what was going on and say, what do you know, that's how she's getting it out probably. And I said, you are totally right. And I was so thankful to have that friend in my life and she knows who she is and she's out there right now, and said, you know, of course that's coming out in this way for her because she probably can't verbalize it the way you would. And I had to sort of step back and recognize that was the case. So I think you might be looking at, if you're experiencing that with some of your kids, that could be happening. And it probably is happening because they can't express it. So it's coming out in a lot of different ways. So I think take a step back for a minute if you're seeing behaviors in your children that you haven't seen before. And I've had a lot of moms and dads say to me, my kid seems angrier, more upset, talking to me in a way that they never have before. And then, you know, and my mom will say to me too, although I know this, you know, you're safe for your kids. They know they can say anything to you and you're still going to be there and you're still going to love them and you're not going to leave them. You're the predictable person in their lives. You're the safe person. So it doesn't mean it's okay. Like, I want to kind of say that too. And my husband and I talk about this a lot. It's not acceptable. It's not okay behavior, but at least you understand where it's coming from. And that's a starting off point for a conversation of, hey, I've noticed this behavior lately. Let's sit down and talk. Like, so what was going on with Annie? I then sit down with her and say, hey, this is how you've been lately. Like, what's going on? Where's your head? What's happening? And you can have those meaningful conversations. Screen time. That's something else that I think it needs to be talked about too. A lot of our kids are having a lot more screen time. A lot of us have relaxed our rules, understandably so. I'm not here to say you can't do that. You know, we had a no Fortnite rule in my house. No Fortnite. I'll tell you right now, my kids are playing Fortnite because it's a social interaction for them. And we had to talk about that and say, that's how they're meeting. That's how they're hanging out with each other. My daughter was on with Fortnite with her friends last night for probably an hour or two, but I could hear them talking. They were interacting. So I was like, oh, okay, we still had to put those rules in, but screen time comes with a price. So you have to think about, how do you do that? And how do you limit that? How do you balance that? And it is a huge challenge. And we're still working on that in my house. So I think that's it. And that leads, and then there's that social isolation that a lot of you've talked about too. Before USchool opened back up in person, it was hard for me to get my daughter to go see her friends even safely. She just kind of withdrew into herself. So encouraging them gently, finding ways for them to get out to see people, but you're going to probably be seeing that. And how do you get those interactions in this way? And I don't have a great answer because you have to do it in a way that you are safe, and everybody has different feelings on that for your own safety in your own way, but finding ways for them to still connect, FaceTime, or if it's through Fortnite or if it's through other ways with a family or something, I think is important, because that social isolation is going to continue. I saw that with my daughter, and it was going down a path that I didn't think was good. So we figured out ways to kind of find her to do that in a way that she was comfortable with and that I was comfortable, because it's going to continue to lead down to a path that isn't going to be healthy. Academic struggles. So this is something that does continue to happen. Zoom versus in person. How are you working with that? How is that happening? You're going to continue to see that for the reasons we talked about earlier. They continue to struggle with, am I in person? Am I on Zoom? How am I connecting with my peers? How am I connecting with my teachers? How are they working with that? And how are your children dealing with that? And it's confusing. And again, this is not, and I know, I saw Donna Toby on here. I saw Lisa Chansey. So this is not a criticism on them, but I sat down with Teddy one day to go through his Canvas. I'm a professor at FIU. I use Canvas. I was confused at one point, and I went through it all, and I sent something to the teachers, and I was like, okay, even I couldn't follow some of it. So, and this is not a criticism on them, but it's difficult. So, and the teachers are great and they work with you. So I think it's hard for students though. So, they're sitting on a Zoom sometimes for 7 hours a day, and then they have to do other things. So managing all that, this is not easy for anybody. And I think the school has done a great job, but being in communication with them is really important. If you haven't done this, my recommendation is to reach out, to talk with Lisa Chansey. And again, this is from a genuine and true place. And I'm not saying this just because she's here. She's great. I talked to her yesterday. I'll send her an email and I'll say, hey, can I talk to you? And Donna Toby was the same when I was in lower school. I can't speak for upper school. We're not there yet. But, rather than chatting, if you're on a chat with moms, which is really great, or chat with dads, if you have a question, you have a concern, reach out to the school, because you can get your questions answered and it might make you feel better about some things. Even if your child is struggling, there's no shame in that. So, and I'll tell you, my kids struggle sometimes. So I just reach out and say, hey, we got to figure this out together, because it is confusing. And I think it's okay if you're confused. And I just told you, I use Canvas all the time. And I went on with Teddy and I was like, I'm confused. So if I'm confused, my 11-year-old is confused. And some of that is because in your brain, when you're creating a canvas, it makes total sense to you, but on the user end, it can be confusing. And that's human. That's normal. There's nothing wrong with that on a teacher end or a student end, but communicate about it. And listen to your student. And if they say, I don't get it, then you say, okay, let's figure out why you don't get it. Show me. Don't just kind of talk. Say, let's sit down, let's look at it together, and let's get your teacher involved. We talked about the challenges in working out the peer issues. So I think that's a big issue that you want to kind of take a look at and figure out how they're dealing with that. Because, and this has happened for years. I think I shared this maybe last time, but I would be working with a residence hall issue and the two students would say, oh, we just texted about it. We're sitting in the same room and we just texted. And I'm like, no, let's actually talk together. So you want to take your cues from your student, but from your kid, but at the same time, encourage them to talk to one another, encourage them, listen to them. Okay, so I want to get to kind of what you can do. So the first thing, and this is something I stressed in my last presentation, is be empathetic. It is the number one tool that you have in your toolbox. This is incredibly hard, but I would not be doing justice to what I do or what I'm here to talk to you about if I didn't empathize. I'm saying getting empathy and empathy. Anyways, this is what you need to do, because empathy is really, really important. I'm doing a mental health presentation for you right now. That is what is important. You have to try to think like them. Sometimes I say, oh my gosh, I do not want to be in the head of an 8th grader or a 6th grader, but you have to. You have to try to get out of your own head and not like you. And that's sort of the birthday example that I was using. My daughter's birthday was last week. We had originally planned to go to Universal Studios for her. That got canceled. Then we planned a 10-person dinner safely down at a restaurant she wanted to go to in Miami. That got canceled because of a variety of reasons. Then we were going to do something else, canceled. So she was off her mind, mad, angry, yelling. And then I was getting mad and angry. And then, and I said to my mom on the phone, why didn't she just come downstairs and say, Mom, I'm really disappointed about this, but I understand. I know you've worked really hard. Let's figure something out. And she started to laugh and she said, come on, you're thinking about this like a 47-year-old, not like a 13-year-old turning 14 who just got everything taken away from her. And I said, you're right. So you sometimes have to think through the eyes of your kid and take a step back and remember that they don't think like we do. And I said this at the beginning, and understand where they're coming from and not have the expectations that they're going to process things the way that we do. So try to listen and talk openly and honestly with them, which is extremely hard. So, and I'm not telling any of you that this is easy to do, because it's not. I mean, the way my daughter was acting, and please, any of you that know her or have her friends, please don't share any of this, but her actions were terrible. And I was angry, but I had to stop and sit back and think, okay, I got to see this from her perspective from a minute. And I have to try to not react and escalate with her, because that's not going to do any of us any good. So that's where we want to try to come from. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but empathy is really important, and empathy is different from sympathy, as you know. So listening and saying, that's so hard. This is awful. I'm sorry this is happening. And at one point I was chatting with her and I said, yeah, this is the worst. This is terrible. I'm so sorry. This is no good. And then we were able to come down and figure something out. And then she was okay with our plan B. Trying to keep the routine as best as you can. This is obviously going on much longer than any of us wanted. So as much as you can keep things routine, that's going to be your best bet, because as we talked about at the beginning, they thrive on these routines. Keeping things in perspective. So what really matters? Nothing's really normal right now. It hasn't been for a while. So how can you find that balance between what is important and what really matters? So, sometimes it's really important to me that my kid goes to school, that they go. But then if they say, I really don't want to go today, or I can't go today, or I need a day off, okay, maybe that's what you need. So we talk about what matters. Do their grades really matter? For some of you, they do. If you're in upper school, yeah, they really matter. If you're in lower school, middle school, it depends. So you have to look at those things, and you have to look at, what is worth fighting about? What is worth getting your student more stressed about, and figuring that out together. And that's important. Why are they getting a low grade on something? To me, is more important than the low grade. So rather than focusing on a low grade that a student has, why are they getting the low grade? What happened? Where did that come from? Why are they struggling? Rather than just, putting a low grade in your kid's face. Why did you get this grade? Look at this grade. This is terrible. Okay, what's happening? Why are they getting that? What is going on there? And figuring out, the why behind what's going on, and what decisions you're making as a family, I think is really important. And how you're making your decisions on doing things, and what you're sort of making your kid do when it comes to things. At least that's the big fight in my house a lot of times, is my kid doesn't want to do something. I want them to do something. Where are we going to find the decision, and what matters, and where am I going to push and where am I not going to push? So that's really important. Limiting screen time, I think we talked about. Implementing structured family time, I think I talked about this last time too, is really great. We do a Sunday night family game night. We have dinner together as a family. We play games. There are no screen times, and that's every Sunday night, and we do that. So things like that is really important. If that doesn't work for you, find something else that works for your family. But I think finding those moments is important, or finding what works for your family that matters. Watching The Office is huge in my family. We really enjoy it. So we find time to sit together and do that. I'm going to be wrapping up soon so we can get to questions. Supporting the school and the teachers, I do think, is important. Your kids need to have a sense of trust right now. Nothing has been stable for them. So let's say you don't agree with something. Let's say you and your partner don't agree with something. Don't have that conversation in front of your kids, because then their whole sense of stability continues to get lost, because then they don't trust. And then we talked about routines being gone. We talked about them feeling that they have no sense of safety. And then if they hear you questioning decisions that are happening, that continues to erode. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have questions. You shouldn't question what's being done. You should. That's part of your role as a parent. Just try to limit that in front of your children, because then they continue to not have trust. So try to provide that united front so they feel more secure. The last thing I want to say before I open up to some questions, looking at the time, is that you have to be the grown-up in the relationship. And I put kind of a smiley face in there, because I think that's more challenging than it sounds. And I go back to some of my experiences. It's very easy to fight with our children, and times that they make you incredibly maddening. So I think that it's important that you remember that you have to be the adult sometimes, and that when they do the fighting with you, or when you're arguing, sometimes it's more important that they understand that you're listening, that you listen to them rather than you win. And sometimes you just have to let it go in that moment. Now, this is incredibly hard, and I'm constantly working on it. But what I mean is that you have to, maybe it's best if I can explain. So I was in an argument, shockingly, with my 8th grader the other night, and sometimes it's better for us. This might sound funny, but I actually think it's a good tool. We separate and then we text about it sometimes, because if we're in each other's faces, we just yell, and then it's no good for anybody. So she was texting me, and everything she was saying, honestly, was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. And I was like, I wanted to go back to her, to every single thing, and be like, you're wrong. That's crazy. Here's where you're wrong. Here's where you're wrong. And I could have, because I could have, said every single thing she said was completely wrong. But I stopped myself for a minute and I thought, that's not what she needs right now. So I can either win this argument, and I can be like her and continue to fight and show her where she's wrong, but I'm going to be the grown up here. And I totally switched my tactic, and I said, I'm listening. And then I said, I love you. My door is always open. I'm up till 12 o'clock every night. I am always here for you. I'm sorry you're feeling that way. I love you. And then I switched and I said, do you want to come watch The Office with me? And then it was like ... maybe. And I was like, oh, she's softening. And then, she came down, the argument ended. We watched The Office. We were good. And then we were able to come back to it the next day and have a rational conversation. Now, I'm telling you, that was the hardest thing for me to do ever, because my first text was like, rant, this is why, like, you can't talk to me that way. You're so wrong about this. I don't love Teddy more than you. I don't favor him, like, blah, 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 like all the stuff that she said that was so ridiculous. But she's 14. So I had to sort of just stop and be the grown-up and say, she's not rational. She's 14. Nothing about her is rational right now. So what I'm saying is, for the sake of your relationship, for the sake of the mental health of the people in your house, the children in your house, sometimes you have to stop and say, do I want my kid to be mentally right now, or do I want to win this argument? Now, you might say, I want to win the argument. Okay, that's your choice. But I'm telling you, you will find that things can improve if sometimes you choose to go the way of, I'm just going to listen to what my kid needs now mentally, healthy wise. And then I'm going to come back to the argument the next day and say, listen, I'm glad we were able to snuggle and watch The Office last night, but the way you talked and the way you were last night, that wasn't okay. And they're probably going to be in a better place to listen to you. So I'm hoping that makes some sense. And the nice thing about texting, in my opinion, what works for me is I can rant the text and then delete it before I actually send it. So, and I think that that's the way that they want to know, and that sometimes, and I think that's right. Lisa Chancey just texted me, and she's right, or private me, that sometimes they just need to know that they can count on you and that you're just there for them. Even when they're wrong. And I think that's really hard for us as parents, is most of the time your kids are probably wrong. I mean, I just want to validate that for you as parents in the room. Your kids are probably wrong, but who cares? Who cares? They're kids. It doesn't matter. Now, it doesn't justify their behavior. I've had this conversation with many of my parents' friends. That doesn't justify their behavior. No, it never does. And you need to go back and you need to say that. But I think that when I'm asked to come and present, this is what I'm telling you. And you can listen to me or not. I say this to my students. I say this to my kids. You can hang out from this presentation and say, I don't buy into that at all. You don't have to. But I'm telling you from my experience and from what I see with mental health, the rest will find its way to you, because you're not going to get any of your messages through to them if you've cut that off, if they don't feel that you're at least listening to them or you're at least there for them. So that's the main thing that I kind of want to say in that regard. Be there for them, listen to what they have to say, and then come back to the point you want to make, because otherwise you've cut it off before you can get there. It's hard. It's really hard to do. And I've had a really hard time, and I can be a yeller, and I've worked really hard not to, and I've learned to just walk away and go to another room. And, I shouldn't even really say this here. I'm going because I found it very therapeutic. One of my best friends has older kids than me. And she said, sometimes she just walks in the room and behind their back, she just goes, and I won't do the gesture, but she does it. And I have found it very therapeutic. Behind their backs, I go in another room and I just say what I need to say or do whatever gesture I need to do behind their backs. And then I come out and I'm like, hey, and then I feel better. So sometimes you just have to do it quietly and get it out. But to their, they just want to know that you're there and that you hear them. So yeah, this is just my last slide, which is that, this is something my husband and I have been saying since my children were born. This too shall pass. That everything that you're dealing with feels, and our kids feel this way too. They feel like what they see is never going to end. So I think you telling them too that we will get through this, you will get through this gets better. There was a whole movement on social media, this gets better or something like that, like a whole movement on this that life gets better or this gets better. I forget what it was called, but let them know that this too shall pass. And for you as parents, this too shall pass. So in those moments when you're struggling with your children, just remember, deep breath, it will pass, find a way to settle yourself down, and then it works. So I kind of want to end there and see what questions are out there, if that makes some sense.
Rebekah, thank you so much. I love having you present to our families. I feel like we appreciate so much the depth of understanding you have in this area, but just also how you are. And your candor, I know, is so appreciated because I literally felt like you were in my mind. So I'm sure I speak on behalf of many people who have attended this presentation. So thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all your sage advice. And
sorry, the last thing I wanted to say to you that I didn't was that remember the guidance counselors are there too, and they're really helpful. So I've gone to them many times.
Yeah, and we're gonna wrap up with a slide with some more information about the resources that we have here on campus. But again, I want to thank you and remind everybody that this presentation is recorded because you might be looking around the room saying, oh my gosh, I wish my friend was on this. Will be available in Tuesday's U-Link, and I will be sharing it with my husband later today. This is terrific. So feel free to share this once the link is released. So we did get a few questions. This is a good one, and I know we've all struggled with this. How do you deal with your child's friends who have different social distancing guidelines than the ones that your family has set? That's a tough one.
That's a really tough one. And I don't have a great answer other than I think that you have to, the way that I deal with that sort of is explaining to your children that that's really challenging and that everybody has a right to their own way that they want to handle things. But that, we have our family policies and we have to do that with what's right for our family, and everyone has to do what's right for their family. And I try to tell my family that every family has to do what's best for them right now. And that we try not to be judgmental, that, in any situation that we're dealing with, whether it's COVID or politics or anything else that's going on, we live in a great country where everybody has a right to make their own choices. So, but that we have to make what's best. I typically bring it back to the fact that I have parents that live in the area and that we're trying to keep them safe. So I bring it back to something that makes sense for my kids. So if you're able to bring it back to that in your home, that you're doing this to keep either yourself safe or a loved one safe, sometimes that works. But that what I would say is everything else is just go back to that empathy and just to say, you recognize that this is super hard and that you're sorry that they're dealing with this, that you understand, and that as soon as you can make this possible, and are there other people that they can connect with that maybe share similar that views, that maybe they could connect with those friends.
Okay, good. Great advice. So due to the lack of social interaction for our children, do you foresee any long-term effects occurring? Like maybe they're maturing at a slower rate because they're not having as much social interaction in the classroom as they're used to?
That's a good question. And I think that there's going to be a lot of research done on that. And right now, nobody really does know, but I think we're going to see research coming years later from this. I do think so. I think already we're seeing that. I'll be honest with you. I can only speak my experience with my children and what I'm hearing from teachers. But I think like one thing that is being seen in some of the classes, let's take the current 6th graders. They missed the whole end of their 5th grade year where they would have gotten sort of like the sort of end of what they needed to prepare them to go into middle school. And I think 6th grade teachers, some of them are seeing particularly with, I don't want to call them out necessarily, but particularly I think with some of the boys who mature slower to begin with, they're seeing some stuff that they normally wouldn't because they didn't have the end of 5th grade to really get that finalizing of that transition. So I know my son's struggling with that. So I can only speak for myself, but I hear what teachers are telling me. And they've even said they missed the whole end of their 5th grade year, which is a hugely transitional part for them to get them really ready off into 6th grade. So I think we're already seeing that. And I think some of the 6th grade boys, again, I don't want to speak for all of them. I can only speak for my own, but I know he missed a key moment at the end of 5th grade to really set him up successfully. So those transition pieces were really missed for some kids. So, I mean, we'll work on it. We'll get there and eventually we'll get there. But I think they're catching up where they missed some really important moments, especially if you're a younger kid in those grades. So I think that, I think they're going to get there, but I think it'll be a little slower for some kids because those social interactions that are so important, especially the middle school years, where they're really learning how, and the USchool does a great job with social interaction and working with each other. I don't know what it'll prove, but I do, what we'll see in the research down the years, I don't know. But I think there is a lot of concern about, the rising anxiety, the rising depression, those things, because students are just, we're seeing that in students that they're really dealing with that. And in the college side too, the mental health is hugely rising in college students right now too. So I do think there are going to be some long-term effects if those interventions aren't put in place.
Okay. So like you, my children are older, but we have a lot of people who are on this Zoom call today that have much younger children, maybe children that weren't ready to be thrust into this online world. So do you have any recommendations on what parents can do to teach their younger children what is and what isn't appropriate online? Again, this is an environment that they haven't experienced before, so they've never chatted online or texted their friends. And now again, they're being thrust into this new environment.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because I think every age group has different challenges, right? I think they all have their challenges. If you talk about each age group, there's a challenge. And we're all trying to figure out how do we deal with it. They all have different challenges in that way. And the little people, little people that are dealing with it, it's just not a normal environment for them to begin with. So I think for them trying to be focused and paying attention in this, like even what we're all doing here. I can't even focus sometimes. Like I'll be on a meeting for a few hours and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done. And I'm a professional grown woman. I think to ask, first graders, second graders, kindergartners to do that, I think if they're lucky to get through the year, great. And it's not going to, I'll just say this, it's not going to have any long-term effects on their success going into high school, going to college. They'll be fine. I think teachers and everybody else, and Donna Toby can probably talk about this, and Lisa Chancey can talk about this. They will catch up at some point educationally. I think they'll be fine. I'm not really worried about that as far as their long-term success. I think that the best thing you can do as parents is, monitoring to some extent. This is a parental choice. I think you have to monitor for the little kids, especially, you have to monitor their usage and see what they're doing and talk to them about it. They live in a social media world. So I think again, we talked about this last time, and this is just my personal feeling on this and from what I see. And little kids, it's a little different, but you limit their social interactions on social media, but this is the world they live in. So helping them figure out how to live in it and navigate it is going to be a better course than just banning them, because then they don't learn how to use it. So I think talking to them, looking at what they're saying, helping them understand it, but little kids, it's going to be a little bit harder. But I think explain to them, this is not okay, this is okay, kind of going through it with them. But there's not a really easy answer to that one, because they're kind of thrust into an environment they normally wouldn't be.
Okay, well, thank you so much. So as you had mentioned before, I just want to put some information on the screen here. Can you all see that screen? So obviously, not only is the physical safety a top priority for our students, but also, of course, their mental health well-being. And I don't know if you all realize, but for the past 9 years, USchool has hosted the NSU College of Psychology doctoral students under the guidance of Dr. Caproni. This is how you can follow his team online on Instagram. But if you had any specific questions or concerns about your children, if you are a middle school or an upper school parent, you'd want to have that conversation with your students, your child's guidance counselor. If you are a parent of a lower school child and you wanted to get more information, then you could reach out to Dr. Levine by email. So if you're interested in learning more about this group and the psychological and emotional learning services available, follow them on Instagram and also reach out to your child's guidance counselor in the upper and the middle school, as well as to Dr. Levine in the lower school. So were there any other questions? Okay, well, I just wanted to thank you again, Rebekah. It's always so enlightening. And I don't know, I feel like I just got like a boost of energy and I'm ready to be like super mom when I go home today. So thank you.
Absolutely. Just remember, like I said before, none of us is perfect at this. Our kids are always going to be difficult at times, and we always are going to struggle. And every time, and even for me, there are times that I do things and then I'm like, okay, I just did that terribly. So, you know, it's a constant struggle and just trying to remember and, you know, do your best. It's difficult right now.
Yeah, great advice. Okay, well, thank you. And thanks to all the attendees. Again, this link will be a SKU link. So look for it and be sure to share with your friends. Thank you so much for coming this morning. Bye, everyone.
Bye.